Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to go over an interview that BVVD did with a Chinese social media set. Basically, they asked him a bunch of questions, mainly around China, but also some other things in the game, and I thought in this video we would go through it. The interview is in Chinese, and obviously BVVD is speaking Russian, so it's a little bit hard to get the translation through, but I ended up doing it through separate people. Thank you to Diaboli and also a few others for helping with some of the translations. So what we're going to do in this video is talk about the major topics that he talked about. Obviously, with a lot of these kind of interviews, a lot of the information that you get is already known about, or it's information which is like, hey, War Thunder's a great game, you should come and play it. So what we'll do is we'll just nail down the nitty-gritty parts and talk about that, because that's at least the more interesting part. As always, if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get into the questions and the answers. Just before we get into them, I will leave a link to the video if you want to have a look yourself, and I don't understand how anybody can watch this video and not have their brain fry, just because of all the random stuff that's going on the screen all the time. It is just nuts to me that that's a normal thing, but c'est la vie. That's basically where we are. So when it comes to War Thunder and also this interview, one of the things that always gets asked in this interview is the process of what the kind of developers and also designers go through in order to bring in new content. And that is something which is started off basically straight away, basically with how do they come up with new plans, how do they, think about future plans, what is the planning strategy of War Thunder. And it's also something that we've had a little bit of insight into when it comes to War Thunder the last few years, with stuff like the roadmap, for example, taking off, but also some other parts as well, being a little bit more open when it comes to the community managers talking about what types of vehicles are being worked on, or even the leaks, which have basically spoiled everything that has been coming out in the updates, which has been pretty impressive at the time. So yeah, it basically talks about the idea of bringing in new vehicles and obviously analyzing the current state of the game and looking for new nation tech trees to kind of add into it. Basically analyzing real military power of countries and working out what nations are worthy of putting into the game at a given time. And also, can you put them in as subtrees? How are you going to add them in? So just talks about the different factors that goes into choosing how does a nation get in, how do they work out a vehicle should come in, and also what other factors do they look at when it comes to future content in terms of mechanics and game features for the vehicles themselves, or even maps. And I think in general, it's something that he's said quite a lot, the idea that they do put a lot of effort into kind of future-proofing and also looking forward into it, and you can kind of see that with War Thunder. It's one of the games that has the most updates ever out of pretty much every video game, and there is constantly content turning up all the time, which is pretty nuts. So then the question was asked, on top of the kind of new nation tree setup, what about Chinese Navy? That is something that hasn't turned up yet and is one of those places where Gaijin could actually expand. You got to remember, the Chinese community in War Thunder is huge. It's very, very large, and there's no reason why they wouldn't expand into naval for China, apart from what BVVD says. Basically, right now, at the current moment, they don't plan on adding the Chinese Navy, but won't say never, because it might happen in the future. The problem with the Chinese Navy is there's a few classes of ships that are missing, and also not many of the others, but in the future they're going to look at how to complete it with other additions, which basically means other nation ships. Kind of like with France, where you have the addition of Benelux, where you can bring in their naval forces to help out their tech tree. There's no reason why with China you couldn't do the same. China doesn't have a ton of naval stuff apart from in the modern era. That is very true. They also used a lot of other nations' vehicles during the time. Even if you have a look at, the ROC and the PLA, there isn't really enough to make a tech tree that interesting. And as we've seen with France, with their blue water and their coastal, it isn't just about whether you make it, interesting. The question is there enough of a need there for people to actually play it and spend money on it? And that is the key part of it. If you can work that out, or if the money is there, then the thing will get made. If their projections are that it will, have a return on investment compared to other stuff, of course, because maybe other things have a larger return on investment, but it means it will be in the plan at some point. And right now, they just don't see that, which kind of sucks. So hopefully at some point, that will happen. They also talked about the idea of adding more nations, not just to China, but also to other ones. And BVVD talks about how they have more plans for more nations, and also the fact that they added the Pakistani vehicles last update, and they do plan to add even more, and not just Pakistani vehicles to China. So it looks like China itself is going to get more nations, but also at the same time, more nations will be coming to the game, which is pretty cool. When you think about the amount of export vehicles that not just America and Germany do, but also China, there's plenty of options where they can just throw in a bunch of different vehicles all over the place. Of course, Thailand is one of those that is kind of hovering around the wings, but that looks more like it's going to go to Japan. But you never know. North Korea might turn up, and also some African nations which do use quite a lot of Chinese equipment too. He also makes mention of the Chinese Terminator being a pretty interesting vehicle. He likes how it looks strange and also has some unique abilities, such as the fire and forget missiles and also the drone on it, which is quite fun. So I wonder if at some point they will actually add the drone system to the Terminator. This is actually the event vehicle that they had, the QN506. The QN506 does have a drone. It has the good old Scout UAV, but if you actually have a look on its model, it has an area where you can actually keep a drone on the back, and the idea is you fire it up and then go from there. So I wonder if they will ever actually implement an animation for that, or a unique drone for it. We did see in one of the leaks that they were trying to do some more drones, which is quite fun, so maybe we will get some more unique ones. But the QM506 isn't a vehicle I really enjoyed that much, mainly because it's not survivable at all, and also at the same time, like, it has just a weird wonky armament. It is a bit of fun, I will say that. It's a good event vehicle, but yeah, it's not great as a vehicle. BVD also said he really liked the look of the J10. It's the most visually nice one to look at, and obviously it's very sleek, it's very modern, and that's something that the Chinese tech tree seems to get before a lot of other nations. More kind of, I suppose you'd call them like modern aircraft, and the way that they look is always beautiful to see, which is really good. Then, unfortunately, he got asked the question, which is always the rough one to answer in terms of these types of things, which is about basically improvements to Chinese vehicles, but also just vehicles in general. Like, how do you combat the fact that there's always a lot of bugs in the game? How do you combat the amount of bug reports that's coming in? And he just talks about its incremental improvements, isn't it? Basically, you turn up, you incrementally improve what's around, and then you just keep fixing stuff over and over and over again. Keep finding new information, keep upgrading stuff, keep trying to make stuff more and more available for people in a realistic way. And he also says sometimes that's impossible, and he's completely right about that fact. Sometimes it is completely impossible to be able to do that because you can't get the information, and sometimes it puts them in a very difficult position where people want it to be quote-unquote realistic, and they have an idea in their head about what is realistic, but it isn't. It might be realistic, but you can't prove that it's realistic, and that is the issue. And this happens a lot with Chinese vehicles because there's a lot of secrecy around them, especially modern vehicles, and it's something that's just kind of going to get worse over time, and that kind of sucks. But at the same time, it's either you get these vehicles in this state because it's the only way you can add them in, or you don't get them at all. And if you didn't get them at all, I feel like people would probably complain even more about not having them in the game. He also did confirm that they do have plans for more skins and camos for Chinese vehicles, which shouldn't really be surprising at all, since, they've been doing it for many years, which is quite interesting. And there was something that was talked about in terms of kind of protection systems. So one of the areas that Gaijin is really lacking in terms of ground vehicles is defensive systems. A few vehicles have APSs, a few vehicles have passive protection systems, but they don't really work very well. The active ones are not too bad, they generally work okay, but the passive ones, like the Dazzler and stuff like that, generally don't do too much. Now, the interesting thing about it is he actually does talk about how there is a lot of vehicles in the game that should have certain abilities that they don't have because they haven't been modeled in the game, such as stuff like a laser rangefinder or a missile guide beam to try and actually stop these things, right? To have like a blocking operation for a vehicle or something that would block a laser rangefinder, for example, or block a missile guide beam, so therefore it couldn't come in and hit you. These things aren't present in the game, but in real life they are. And one of the things that ground vehicles are severely lacking in War Thunder, especially since offensive capabilities have been increased over and over and over again, specifically for CAS, by the way, is they have no way of defending themselves. And the ways that you have to defend yourself are very, very low compared to the offensive capabilities of many. So here he talks about the fact that, these things aren't modeled in the game. Hopefully in the future they will be, but unfortunately right now they're not. And that has been an issue with War Thunder forever. The simple fact that this game, it always goes for the offensive capabilities first, and then it tries to add defensive ones later, and it just doesn't work. And instead it just frustrates people, and it means that the high tiers are always just a mess, specifically in ground, but also in other areas too. So also, at the same time, when it comes to the Chinese stuff, the guys asked, are you going to add or update new things? And of course the answer is yes, because why wouldn't it be? They're always going to constantly going to update and add new vehicles. They're not just going to turn around and be like, you know what? No, no more. We are not doing any more. We've decided we don't want to make any more money. We don't want to collect £200. We don't want to pass go. We're going straight to jail. And but no, they are obviously doing it. And one of the updated models, obviously recently they have updated a few of them, like the ZTZ-99, for example, fixing a few of its little issues. One of the vehicles that they've talked about that they do want to update is the Chinese T-26, so the reserve vehicle. Now, I don't know if there's a huge difference between the one that we have in the game and the one that was there in real life, but this might mean that we could lose we could lose the T-26 in favor of a different vehicle. So it might be worth making sure to have that, or at least spade it, kind of like with the PT-76, right, for China, where they removed it and then replaced it with the 211. Who knows, with the T-26, they might do something else with it, which would kind of suck. So just make sure you have that sorted. Also, the interesting thing about it is they actually, or BVVD was asked about mortars and artillery, because why not? For some reason, that is one of the big things right now, indirect fire, because people just won't shut up about it and won't go play World of Tanks to kind of prove how stupid and dumb the idea is. Instead, we have to constantly increase mechanics and make the game worse for it. Now, basically, in realistic battles, one of the problems with adding SB or indirect fire mechanics is range. Simple as that. Like if you have a look that a lot of the SPHs we have in the game, they're designed to fire over many kilometers instead of a smaller area. And that's basically what BVVD says. Basically, the minimum fire range is bigger than some of the map sizes. So adding in a mechanic, which would only work in very, very limited scenarios, but also at the same time would be incredibly annoying to fight against, seems like a terrible idea. And that's basically it. Now, he does actually talk about the fact that in the game you can already do indirect fire, which is true. Basically, if you have the drone, you can ping on the map, and then you can work out the distance on the map, and then you can use stuff like the ZBD or the ZBD-04A's 100mm gun or the BMP-3 to fire over somewhere and kind of plonk stuff down. You can also do this with a bunch of other vehicles too, mainly stuff like the Storm Tiger, for example, or even a lot of the SPHs, and that, you know, can work pretty well. But the idea of adding in a top-down artillery mechanic is a no right now, and that's good. That's how it should be, and it should stay that way forever. If they ever add something like that into the game, it will be incredibly frustrating to play against, and that is the problem. And BVD even says it. The player base would be is very skeptical about asymmetrical stuff, and will always look as if they're on the losing side. But that allows us to add new weapons and vehicles, and such asymmetrical regime is being considered already as a separate game mode or a separate mission. So it looks like maybe they might add these in, but not in the major game modes, which is fine. If you want to give crazy people stuff, give them stuff. You know, just don't do it anywhere near me, because I have no interest in that. And asymmetrical gameplay is not fun. This is being the crowning issue with War Thunder. The fact that certain nations have access to mechanics that other nations don't, therefore parity is incredibly low, and it becomes frustrating to play against. Anybody who has ground through any of these tech trees and got to the high echelons of ground and played only MBTs without any SPA backup, without any light tank backup, without any CAS backup, I'm looking at you, Israel, but also other nations in the past, that is horrific. It works awfully, and it just doesn't feel good. And the idea of adding certain mechanics to certain nations and not adding them to others because, I don't know, they want to, just seems like a terrible idea. Then talks about the good old TV guided ground missiles, which is quite fun. Another good old asymmetrical setup. So basically a guided weapon that sends an image that is seen by the ground operator so that he can correct its flight. So pretty much like laser guided stuff. So if you laser a target on the ground from the sky, somebody can drop in a, you know, laser guided bomb on that laser target. That's what he's talking about. They're probably going to add that in at some point. Don't know whether a lot of people use it, but once again, if you're in a squad, that will be really, really powerful, and just another offensive capability with no defenses at all, which kind of sucks. But how can you do anything about it? The last part is they basically ask him about artillery once again, but in the form of missiles, because why not? Because once again, we just have to keep marching forward, because if it exists in real life, it has to be in War Thunder. That's the motto, right? That's how all this stuff goes. But basically, he doesn't consider it a good idea to add massive rocket or missile systems which have been used in recent conflicts in the world, because you can't defend against them, and also people could just spam your spawn or spam key areas with it, and there's nothing you could do about it. Basically, one missile after the other, just bang, 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 and yeah, you can't do anything about it. Basically, until complex active protection systems are widespread on vehicles, it's not even worth even considering this type of weapon. But you know what they will consider? All the ridiculous CAS elements and munitions that they are considering and also implementing over the last little period. Kind of interesting how that works. So no random missile or rocket barrage but you can get J-damned, or, or you can get guided bombed, or you can get, guided missiled, and other systems, such as helicopters, are allowed more complex active protection systems, but tanks aren't. So, yeah, you can't defend yourself against laser stuff. You can't do anything like that. It's... oh dear. Yeah, it's just how... It's the age-old thing. Good luck being in a tank. As simple as. But yeah, so that's basically the interview. It's pretty good. As I said, the visuals of the interview are really tough to look at, but everything else about it is fine. Generally, it's a good one and a pretty standard one. We learn a bit more information about some new nations that are going to come in, and also the thought process behind a lot of the munitions that they've been adding and their thoughts behind it, and I think that's super useful. And hopefully we can get a proper developer Q&A soon, so we can see some other stuff going on. And also updates to the roadmap would be quite nice too. As always though, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.